I'm still giddy with excitement and
I'll take this down.
yeah. I think maybe it's because it all started as one very exciting idea when I was having a quick chat with Kat. So Kat is the student enterprise manager at the University of Surrey. They've been super fantastic and supportive of every single thing I've been doing with the book lady. And she was just like, why not reach out to the libraries, perhaps launch a partnership with them where you can sort of like shine the spotlight on writers of color and let people get to know more about books that are a bit more diverse. And I thought like, yeah, I should go for it. And so I took the bold step sometime in, I think it was August, September this year. And Lydia, who happens to be the manager here, was super kind enough and very receptive of my idea. And I'm just so thankful it's all coming alive now. And I'm also very grateful to Ola for, making time out of our busy schedule to, be here. Thank you so much. Because as soon as I got the approval from the library, I felt like, okay, one of the first things I needed to think about is get that author in. And I reached out to a couple of authors, many of them had such a tight schedule. And I remember growing up, I used to read Ola, and she was so kind enough to respond to my DM. And the rest, like they say, is history. So I'm so happy to be here. I'm so thankful to every single person that decided to show up. And I hope the next about 60 minutes would be a very exciting one for everyone. It's going to be highly conversational. Let's just have fun and talk about books really, and I really hope up to now you invite more people to show up and this becomes sort of like a movement at one point or the other. So thank you. Thank you for the housekeeping, so I definitely do not have to go over that, and I will very quickly want to read the bio of the author. For those who do not know Ola Awonubi, I hope I got it pronounced.
You got it.
Yay. So Ola Awonubi holds a BA in creative writing and imaginative practice from the University of East London. Whoa, amazing. Okay, in 2018, a short story, The Pink House, won first prize in the National Words of Color competition. Another short story of hers, The Go Slow Journey, won the first prize in the fiction category for Wasafiri's New Writing Prize 2009 and the Best Author CA Awards 2019. And numerous short stories have been published widely and especially in the Keep the Faith magazine. Ola has authored several books. Love's Persuasion 2015 and Love Me Unconditional 2018 were published by Ankara Press, an imprint of Cassava Republic in Abuja, Nigeria. Nigeria Love Stories was published by Conscious Dreams Publishing in England in 2018. Finally, 14 Days and Other Stories, a romance novella, and Reasons Why I Need to Get Married Yesterday and Other Poems were published last year. Our next book, which is historical fiction, is currently with our new publishers, One More Chapter, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers. Ola works full-time as a civil servant in London and tries to find time for sightseeing and traveling when she isn't writing and dreaming up new characters. It's so lovely to have you here, and I am so excited about your new book. Let me just first of all talk about the new one. I've always known you to be a romance fiction author, and so I am curious to know why that specific genre of literature for you.
Funny enough, I'm trying to. I think I used to write short stories about. If you notice, I start my the first competition I won was actually in writing short stories,
Okay.
and they used to, the whole emphasis was more about politics and what was happening in Nigeria, and really serious stuff.
Yeah.
And then sometime in about 2008, a company contacted me in Abuja, that's Cassava Republic Fest, saying that they wanted to start a romance imprint, something like Mills and Bones, but basically set in Nigeria, because I grew up reading Mills and Bones, and reading about these tall,
dark and handsome.
Mills and Bones have got a lot to answer for, really, in terms of, so they now wanted really was they had a lot of young girls growing up and they just wanted to give them a different kind of concept about love, and to kind of for people to fall in love, and not necessarily to be the norm of what they see in Hollywood and that kind of stuff. So we fall in love. We just don't fight wars and that kind of stuff. There was this whole situation about kind of poverty porn, where you're constantly seeing people from that continent either covered in flies, fighting, dying, killing themselves. So we fall in love as well. And they wanted their books to showcase that, and they approached 10 authors, and I was one of them. And that's why I decided to write that. It wasn't that I actually wanted to, because I actually didn't sort of give it a go and see. And then since then, I've more or less been writing one romance after the other. I found that I like the genre.
Yeah, amazing. I love what Ankara Press has been able to do for romance, especially those that had a bit of context. Because, I mean, growing up in Africa, the bulk of the kind of books you have to, that form your early reading, especially during your teenage years, the Mills and Bones, and you just have this idea of a tall, dark, and handsome guy. They are usually not dark anyways, they are like knights in shiny armor.
Ryan Gosling.
Exactly. And when I found out about Cassava Republic's Ankara Press, I thought like, ooh, these are quite relatable characters, and the setting were around familiar places for someone who grew up in Africa or in Nigeria. And so it's so fascinating how Love Persuasion was quite really resonated for me, and which is going to lead me to my next question about how the book in focus today, which is Lovers, Leavers, and Keepers, is going to fall under what people categorize as Christian fiction, if I'm being right. And one of the biggest Christian fiction authors that I'm a huge fan of is Francis Rivers. And so I'm curious to know if you draw inspiration from such authors and who your biggest influences are as a writer.
My faith is a really big part of my life as a Christian, and I just thought to myself, after reading Redeeming Love about 25 years ago, I just thought I'd like to be able to write like that, because it wasn't preachy. She wasn't shoving what she believed down your throat, but she would be using her faith to really talk about how it affects our daily living and the choices that that were made in that book. And I think the book's gone on to have a Hollywood film as well. That came out last year, I think. So
have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. But it hasn't come to England yet. I think I haven't seen it. I know it came out in America, and then it's out in South Africa. But so that really inspired me, because the whole thing is I wanted to be able to write and make it realistic to the man on the street, and not just talk about generalities or like fluffy stuff. So with Redeeming Love, I mean, there's some very hard topics there in terms of dealing with child abuse, rape.
Very sensitive.
Very, very sensitive. Those are not the kind of things you usually see in typical in faith fiction, whether that's Christian fiction or whether the writer is either Christian, whether they're Hindu or whether they're Muslim. We tend, as people of faith, we tend to shy away from that. But then again, what use is our faith if we don't actually, bring it into our everyday living? And that was usually I don't tend to write faith fiction, but this is my first attempt. I thought to let me do that. And dealing with some of the topics we like to shy away from in current Nigerian society, in terms of domestic violence and the whole place of the expectation of the girl child to get married. And you can see what that did with the choices made.
The societal pressure.
The societal pressure in sub-Saharan Africa is huge. And I won't say victim, but I have seen that pressure, and I've seen what it's done to people. I have been in a position where I could see what it was doing to me, and I stepped back and thought, you know what, I wouldn't want to be 20 years old in that kind of community, having to be faced with those kind of challenges where in my society, and I don't think it's just my community as well, if you're not married, you will be seen as a disgrace. It's kind of rammed down your throat from the time you're old enough to like walk around, So I tried to bring that into the book, and how her faith helped her towards the end to make the right choices that were best for her.
Let's talk about societal pressure for a minute. I feel it's not something peculiar to the African culture alone. Women, irrespective of our backgrounds, or even men as well, there's just this particular they come in different shapes and form. I feel that they are sometimes nuanced,
Yeah.
and it can be quite a lot to deal with sometimes. And I felt the plight of the major character Ola at this point. But before we dive right into it, for the benefit of those who haven't read this book, I think it would be fair enough to share a bit of what it's about without giving away spoilers, definitely. So do you want to tell the audience a bit about the book?
Okay. The book is about two people who fall in love at a wrong time in their lives, and a lot. And then basically, when they grow up, I'm really going to paraphrase it. By the time they grow up and they find out that life has given them a second chance, there are all kinds of impediments in the way. And this book more or less shows how their faith and their belief in themselves and the fact that they've both grown up through really tough, different things that happen to both characters. I try to make sure when I write that there's a character arc in the characters so you can see some element of growth. And by the time they both grew up, by the different things that happened to them, their eyes were like open to realise that let's give it another chance. It's a bit like it's a bit like in the case of Jane Austen's Persuasion, where Wentworth first approaches the lady, and then when her eyes are open, she realizes that I turned him down once. So that elements of also in this, she turned the guy down in Persuasion because he didn't have the money, didn't have the title.
It didn't look the part.
It didn't look the part. And so this time, as I said, she's grown up and she began to realize that all the things that we make an emphasis of in that society. The guy must have money, he must have a house, he must have all those things. Really, they don't make up for bad character.
Yes.
And by the time she'd seen the character of the person she was with, she was really ready at this particular point in time to make the choice for the kind of guy that would really give her peace. And he also needed to do some growing up as well, because he was a bit judgmental and wasn't kind of like realistic to her own needs as well. So,
Amazing. Thank you for not giving so much away and letting everyone get a bit excited about why they should actually read Lovers, Leavers and Keepers. And I want us to take a minute to talk about Ola Awonubi, who is like the major character in this book, like I rightly mentioned. And I felt like she was unrealistically naive. Beyond that as well, I thought she was quite gullible, but I found some of her struggles, the challenges she had to face, and some of the decisions she had to make at a very young age, they kind of like resonate with me. They were relatable. They are the typical struggle of every young woman, irrespective of your race or background. And so I am curious to know what your perception is of how Black women growing up in any part of the world at all can do to handle some of the societal pressure that they face, irrespective of whichever shape or form that they come. What would you think would be your advice to them?
Okay. Ola represents so many young ladies today. So in her particular case, she was born in England and then taken back to Nigeria. But even if you were born here and you happen to be a child of first generation parents who's come to this country, you're born with that sense of expectation that you have to do well, you have to do the family proud, you can't let the family down. So you find out that you are making choices, the kind of choices that your parents want you to make, not necessarily your choices. So she was making choices based on what she thought was best for her family and not best for her, which is the kind of thing that you do when you're in maybe your early 20s. And if the people that have been around her in her circle have been more attentive to her needs, they would have said, no, don't do this now.
But mom attempted to, but I wish she was a bit more assertive.
The mom, I wish the mom had been more assertive, but from what I've seen, sometimes in some communities, our mothers tend to step back, especially if it's a kind of a patriarchal society, where, take for example, if in my community the daughter says she wants to study, the father says, I want my daughter to study law or medicine, And the mother says, I don't think she's up to it, and I think she would probably be better studying fashion design. If she doesn't allow what the father wants to take place, then the father and the father's family might say something along the lines of, you spoiled this girl's life. So sometimes a mum might take a bit of a step back, because in my community it said a good child is a child of the father and a bad child is a child of the mother. That's what is said in Yoruba culture, basically. So a lot of times what I believe is that we really need to bring up our girls to be more assertive and to own their choices and to make their choices and to say, this is your choice. I think I appreciate your choice. I salute your choice. That's your choice, because you are going to have to live with it. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I ended up studying business administration because my dad was an accountant, my mum was an accountant, and they were really trying to steer me along the lines of accountancy and business studies. But I always wanted to be a writer. And my foster mum, because I was born in this country and was brought up by an English family, and then in the 70s my parents decided to go back to Nigeria, and then we went with them, and that's kind of brought up all kinds of issues, of different kinds of issues and pressures that I won't necessarily go into today, but they do feed a lot into my writing.
Yeah.
But me and my sister weren't allowed to make those kind of choices. So my dad wanted my sister to be a lawyer, but she just wanted to be a fashion designer.
Wow.
So a lot of times people make choices because they think that's what their dad would like. But that's kind of, this is 2022, and people shouldn't do those kind of things. I think you should really impress on your children to make the choices that are best for them, because they're going to live with those choices. The last thing you want is to be 40 years old, stuck in a job that you hate doing, hating every Monday, because you have to go back to work again, and life, that's too short for that.
Yeah.
Especially now that we've got, things are just so different when I was young. You've got technology, you can become a social media influencer.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can do that don't necessarily involve formal education or getting degrees, especially in a community where the only kind of professions that are impressed upon you are lawyer, doctor, engineer, lawyer, doctor, engineer, pharmacist. And it's like that, with doctor being on top.
Yeah, doctor.
Doctor.
I think there's this thing of pride for most African parents. Like,
it's not just African.
My child is a doctor.
It's not just African.
Are you serious?
It's not just African. I think that the whole doctor thing is something that resonates a lot with a lot of cultures. I think even in terms of British people, it's just saying that my daughter's a doctor.
The repute.
That's very middle class. And then the repute, because in Nigeria, people will actually go around saying, people actually start saying things like Mama Doctor, which means the mother of a doctor. So you go to a party, people are calling you Mama Lawyer, which means the mother of a lawyer. Yeah. So you don't even have, that's not you, that's your name.
It's a title.
So it's a title. So you kind of walk differently to your peers. So it's very much about people, one thing I think I feel that is done is that we dumb down our girls. We dumb down, we make them try and silence them, don't talk too much, don't do this too much, don't do that too much, because men might not like it.
Does it always have to be about men? I honestly feel that these are
society.
Yeah, these are very sensitive issues, and whether we feel to admit it or not, we've been taught or brought up to believe that it's a man's world, and so a woman is supposed to, cower and shrink herself sometimes and make sure that some of her aspirations need to, be submitted to that of a man in court.
In Africa and in Asia and other places like that, people say it's a man's world. But even though we're here now in Europe and UK, and you look back at what's been happening on the social political scene in the past few years, but the men are running things.
Do you feel that is changing, or do you see that changing in the next couple of years?
Things are changing, because you've got, the Prime Minister of New Zealand is a woman, and you've got so many women that are actually beginning to take up space, and you can see the political outcomes where they are,
Mm.
and where they're not, in terms of the fact that sometimes the solutions, the social political solutions, are more practical,
Yeah.
and more holistic,
Yeah.
more less, warlike, as in we need to go to war kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You could even see the outcome in terms of the response to COVID in New Zealand, and the way how that Prime Minister handled things.
Yeah.
So things are coming up, and things are changing in every aspect of life.
Yeah. I truly hope that change happens in my lifetime. Right.
I have every confidence it will be.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, we're going to try as much as possible to make this very conversational. So feel free to chip in your take, your questions, and very quickly we would have the author read an excerpt from the book for us, just to listen in, and so like maybe a few paragraphs, and yeah.
Okay, let me look for
Your favorite?
Okay, yeah.
What page?
146. The last paragraph.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
There came a time in her marriage when Lola started to imagine herself as a butterfly that could fly away when it all became too intense for her to handle. She was starting to feel suffocated. It became her panacea, her balm against hurt. She comforted herself with these thoughts on nights when she lay in bed, trying to put some distance between herself and her husband. By this time, things had got so bad that she couldn't bear him touching her, which he sensed, and this led to more arguments. One night he sat down and delivered a long lecture about wifely duties and his rights as a husband, which she sat down and listened to without a word. That was when he looked at her long and hard. What's happening? I was hoping that you'd be pregnant by now. These things take time, she replied. But it's been almost a year. I know I have no problems in this area. She just stared at him. So how many girls have had the privilege of having children for you? His eyes narrowed. There were a couple of incidents while I was at uni. My father sorted things. Look, don't change subject. She shook her head and kept silent. Why are you shaking your head as if what I said isn't true? Maybe I need to send you to my father's specialist, as he suggested. Let them see what's wrong with you. Tears sprang to her eyes. There's nothing wrong with me. Yeah. So are you saying that I have problems when I have proof that I don't have problems? Before she could think of a comeback, he plunged on. And another thing. My driver, Olu, tells me that you've been taking out the car. It's my car. Surely I can take it for rides if I want to. I don't know why you make it so difficult for me to protect you, he said. All I want to do is to look after you. What's your problem? How many times have I told you that I don't want my wife driving around Lagos having to deal with those Okada drivers and area boys? I got you a driver to spare you from all that. And you still keep purposely taking the car out by yourself. Are you trying to deliberately provoke me? She closed her eyes. He stood up abruptly. A child, one child. Can't you even do anything right? Lola felt a crushing sense of pain as he slammed himself out of the room. That was the first night he stayed out of their matrimonial home. It was the first of many to come.
Wow. Can we take a minute to talk about what played out in that particular exam? Do you want to let people in on what exactly happened, and also briefly touch on issues around domestic violence and different shapes and forms that they take? I feel that there are a bit of elements of emotional abuse, even more than the physical one that played out between Lola and Tunde, and it would be worthwhile to actually talk about that for you there.
Yeah. Okay. She entered into the marriage she thought this was an elevation to her own financial status, and also that of her family. She thought she was helping her family, and that's entering in that particular community, not so much here, but back in Nigeria, sometimes you find young ladies entering into relationships on the wrong foot. So obviously he has lots of money, and she doesn't. Now it might have worked in Pretty Woman and Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, but in real life, it doesn't work. So one of the first things that an abuser does in a relationship is to stop the woman from having any, financial independence. So she was in that so he didn't want her to work, and bit by bit, what they start doing is taking every support system, work, anything that can make basically trying to chip at the person's sense of self-worth and confidence. And that's what's playing out there.
Yeah.
And then the issue of having a child also comes into it.
Yeah.
So they've been married for about a year and there's no child. And in that community, by that time, by at least 6 months to 1 year, there's the pressure starts. We call it womb watching. So the aunties and the mummies and the different women in this community start to make, little nudge, what's happening with her, why isn't she pregnant? And then the pressure starts. So this has already started to play out in the relationship, when he said, you notice also the way he talks to her without any respect. But as I said, it's a setup.
Yeah.
So in that community as well, a lot of times if you look at their agony aunt pages, you see a lot of time somebody will say something like, "Oh, I love my husband and everything," but he said that one of the people start putting down conditions.
Yeah.
Which is why I said, teach your daughter, let's teach our young ladies to be assertive and to have self-worth. When you're dating someone, people tend to see marriage as an ultimate. So someone's putting down conditions. I will marry you, but you have to leave your job. I don't want my wife to work. That's a condition.
Yeah.
But you've just come out from university with a degree, and you want to work. You want to do something about your career.
Yeah.
And then they put these stories out in the agony out, and then so what do I do? He wants me to leave my job. Should I marry him? You're thinking, duh, run for the hills. When they're thinking about this white dress and the day and having 10 bridesmaids and being on Instagram. Ashrabi. We call it Ashrabi. Ashrabi is when I'm sure many of you have seen these pictures on Instagram where we all wear the same thing and we look fantastic, and people are caught up in that whole romanticism of the day, not thinking about what about the day afterwards, and the marriage, thinking about the day. So as you can see, entering into a relationship on the wrong foot without any kind of, you're not bringing anything to it in terms of your own economic, which leaves the door open for abuse, which is what you can see there here, because it begins to systematically break her down mentally, emotionally, to prepare her for the physical abuse that's.
I personally believe that there's a need for women to be economically empowered, for you to be able to grow that courage to walk out of situations that are quite compromising. And an economically empowered woman can stand her own ground and be able to stay very quickly so abuser. And I think that was one thing Ola didn't have the luxury of, and that was partly the reason why I judged that to be a bit gullible. And again, it's fiction, even though it's a reflection of real life. But then there are very few women, because of the way most women are made to grow up in that community. You tend to feel that whatever you achieve, whatever accomplishment you get, there's still the ultimate prize, which is marriage.
You can get a BA, you can get an MA, you can get a PhD, but you need that MRS.
To start?
That's it. You do need the MRS. We've got several Nigerians here that are ladies. You can identify with what I've said. I'm not lying.
What is MRS?
That's an MRS. It's an MRS. It's very, very, very important. To most of my relatives. So when we've had these family meetings and it's discussed, I have been told that. So I do understand that, I've been told that you get your MA, you get what about MRS? It's very important. And so there is that. But I wouldn't want young ladies growing up today thinking that marriage is a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing, especially when you do. Somebody who's not, somebody who's emotionally healthy, and you're seen as partners. You can grow together, you can do things together. It's fantastic. But when it becomes a prison or a trap, or when that person will not allow you to be self-actualized, or maybe sometimes it's also down to a lack of confidence in that person themselves. They're not self-actualized. So if they're not self-actualized, or they're insecure, then they can't. They just wouldn't marry somebody who is secure, because obviously a secure person will see that and say, "Oh God, I'm not going to go into this." And I think, so I had a discussion with someone recently, and what she said was, and I've seen it happen, is that in some communities we like to infantilize our girls. So you keep them at a baby state in their heads. No matter how many degrees they have, it's like, you've got to ask your dad before you do that. You've got to ask your brother before you do that. You've got to ask your mom before you do that. You've got to ask your auntie before you do that. You can't just do that. You can't just cut your hair. You've got to discuss you cutting your hair. You can't just cut your hair. You need to have long hair. You can't just get a tattoo. You've got your tattoo on your leg. You can't do that. You can't just buy a car. You can't just go for your MA until you get married, because that might chase men away. You can't just buy a house like that, because that also might chase men away. So everything revolves around this man that you've not yet seen yet, and you could be 19 years old at this particular point in time. You could be 18. You could even be 10. Because I remember being 10. Since we got back to Nigeria, I was about 10 years old, and my mum already teaching me housework along the lines of, you need to know how to do that, because when you're married, you need to know how to prepare this. When you're married, I was 10, and I thought, I'm just 10 years old. Wow. I'm still playing with dolls and watching cartoons and watching Tom and Jerry and watching children's TV. But as I said, things are changing now, where people are beginning to, as I said, with technology, people are really looking at everything in a different way and seeing how different things are being done. And even in our politicians in Nigeria, that a lot of you get more and more women who are beginning to challenge those things and saying, let this girl go to school, let her go to university, let her, begin to sit down and discern and appraise things before you just say yes to getting married at 21, when you've not really self-actualized yourself. What do you know at 21? I mean, it might be okay for some, but in 2022, I don't think it's the best for most women. 2022 is to try and, so not 2020, at 22, me at 22, me at 32, me at 42, me at 52. Now I'm in my 50s now. I was at different stages of my life, constantly learning and still evolving, which is the word I'm saying, you're still evolving. So that's it.
Interesting. Gonna come back to ask what your take on issues around feminism is, but before then, I want to throw the ground open a bit. Is anyone in the audience interested in sharing his or her take, or I've got questions for Ola, not necessarily about the book, but around some of the key issues she's raised so far? Please feel free. Anyone? I'm really curious to hear what a man has to say, though.
I have I don't know if it's a question, but it's like relating to the paragraph that you read. The earlier bit opens up with the man asking Lola if she's like asking Lola why she hasn't had a child yet, if she's not fertile. Was that like intentional on your part to like make it, because there's this like thing in Nigeria where like infertility is always a woman's problem. Was that just like, or was that just like coincidence?
No, that was intentional.
Okay,
because one thing that I found, because I've got a doctor friend and we discuss these things from time to time. She said, in this country, sometimes a colleague will tell you we're pregnant, or we'll go to the doctor if there's fertility problems and say we want a baby, we're trying for a baby. Sometimes I found my colleagues, UK, my British colleagues saying things like, we're trying for a baby. So that's a male colleague telling me we're trying for a baby. But in Nigeria, the guy would say, along the lines of, she's not yet pregnant, or she's trying to get pregnant.
It's the woman's problem.
You know, and it's seen as a woman's problem, but you do see the woman constantly having to go to the doctor, trying to sort out this fertility problem, which appears to be hers. And sometimes it takes time for it to be noted that, you know, the guy should also go and get himself checked out and see where the problem might be coming from. And it doesn't really matter whether it's your problem or you marriage, you're both one. So why does it have to be the woman's problem or the man's problem, or something that both two people should tackle? So what I try to do in this book is trying to tackle some of those things that we don't talk about in that community. And not, as I said, it's not just a Nigerian community as well, it's just different kinds of communities as well. But you kind of get that less from, you know, in kind of Europe or American point of view than you do with, if it's from Africa or Asia or China. You tend to get it more from there. I haven't really been able to understand why, but that's what I've noticed. So yeah, I did put it in the book, so that when people read the book, they can sit down and kind of like think about it again and say, if there's fertility in the marriage, does it have to be the woman's fault? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it could be the male, and that's usually when things go quiet. And his family don't necessarily want to talk about that because they think that's something about. It's all tied up in the man's sense of worth and the whole area of that doesn't necessarily mean that person doesn't detract anything from a man's masculinity. It's just different kind of health issues where that could cause that. It could be an issue of stress, it could be anything. But we in my community, we cut men a lot of slack.
Double standard.
And there's that double standard with the woman. It wouldn't be that case, but why are you not having children? And then it goes on and on and on and on. And I've seen this cause marriage breakdowns. If she can't have kids, they start putting time to it. It's been 4 years, it's been 10 years. You know, so that's just not acceptable.
So much I have to say concerning this particular issue you just raised. Joy, do you still want to chip in anything else?
No, I was just going to say that perhaps if we treated like fertility issues the way we treat like all health problems, like if you had asthma, then you wouldn't just feel like I'm not like enough of a person because I have a breathing problem. If you had like, you know, like a broken ankle, you would actually seek treatment of those things. So perhaps if we treated fertility like just one of those things that happen to everybody, if you twisted your ankle today, you go to the doctor. Just to do the same thing instead of like, I don't know, coming down on your wife and asking her why she doesn't have a child yet.
I mean, I also think that, you know, for some people they will never have kids, you know, and does that actually detract from the quality of the marriage? In those communities I've seen that happen. I've seen a few brave men that have said, I love my wife, you know, children or no children, we will make this marriage work. We can adopt. We can pour our life into doing other things. Does it have to cause a marriage breakdown? Why does the whole thing, this whole bringing two sets of people together, why does it have to circle around this? And then there's also the issue of the fact that you're being told as a woman that you're not woman enough if you can't have children. So, or you're also being told that why did you come to this earth for if not to have kids? So your whole reason for living has been hijacked by the fact that you don't have kids. So these are things that we need to ask ourselves these questions so that we don't have people growing up with this kind of really, you know, it's very warped. And it makes young people make the wrong decisions and, you know, just be in relationships or situationships just to be in relationships so they, people are not being in relationships for the right reasons, and down the line this can cause all kind of emotional, mental and physical abuse. You know, so
interesting. Glad we're having this conversation, and I think these are issues that we can't talk about enough. I also love that times are changing. A lot of people are beginning to find their voices, and young girls, there's sort of like a paradigm shift in the way girls are being brought up in this age and time, but how young people are being nurtured to actually ask questions, to exercise some measure of sheer curiosity when it comes to issues like this, and I'm also happy that in this age and time, the culture of silence is being broken. And a lot of awareness is also ongoing around issues that have to do with, emotional abuse, domestic violence. There's a need for people to actually speak up and all of that. But I also feel that as much as women are on the receiving end of issues around domestic violence, there's a role men as allies have to play in helping us curb incidents of domestic violence in our society. And what are some of the key suggestions or ideas that you think can help a great deal in getting men to also be at the forefront of, this conversation and, causing this change in mindset? I remember reading a particular blog on Instagram about someone who was emotionally abused in a relationship, and I was like, oh, interesting that the bulk of the people commenting on this particular subject matter are men, and they were quick to point fingers and say, oh, what their brother did was not cool and all of that. But I feel that in order to be able to win this war, or in quote, have a better society, men also have a role to play. What would you advise or say to them in order to help us get one step further to getting a better world out there?
I actually think it starts with women, basically. I mean, it does start with us in some ways, because a lot of times we don't interrogate our brothers and our dads.
Yeah.
And some of the men in our life about their ways of thinking that coming from our community.
Yeah.
We seriously with kids like 10 years old and things like that. Women naturally gravitate to the kitchen to start cooking, and the men they're watching football, and their mothers kind of sometimes facilitate that.
Yeah.
I know of a situation where in the eastern part of Nigeria, a lot of times when the father dies, everything goes to the male heir.
Yeah.
The girls don't get anything, and sometimes the females, the mothers, because it's part of our tradition, they facilitate that. But you're facilitating that to the detriment of your own daughters, because things like, oh, this is our tradition, this is how it's always been. But there was a time when we people were kind of like killing twins in Nigeria, probably in the early 1900s and things like that. People don't. That was part of a tradition, some kind of a tradition that people believed in. They thought that they were experienced or something like that. So things that are detrimental in our culture, we know what to deal with when. So it's about us really as mothers and sisters to help our brothers, because our brothers, they're going to marry or be in relationships. To help them be the kind of men that we would like to marry ourselves or have around us. And sometimes it's up to us to interrogate that way of thought sometimes. Also, I would like to see more male empowerment. So a lot of times we have seen a lot of female empowerment in our community, which is really good, but we need more male empowerment in terms of the fact that there's a lot going out there that affects that, and that's not breaking it down by colour or race, all men generally. Because as I said, there's something about when society begins to change, you need to take everyone along with you. And that's for all faces of society. So take for example now, you have a lot of dissatisfaction going on in society, because people feel that certain parts of the communities are being shown favour and they're being left behind. Whereas you need to take everyone along with you. So there should be more male empowerment in terms of the fact, and that should play out in terms of emotional support, mental health support as well, because you can see what's happening with the cost of living. That has a way of affecting everybody. So mental health support, emotional health support, and that would really, really help. Because if you as a man, you feel happy with yourself and you've got your own self-confidence built in, then there's certain you won't see women as your competition. Because if you see women as your competition and then you're now in a relationship, that's just going to cause more and more problems. So as I said, it's all about mental and emotional health support and opportunities as well. Because people come up from university and it's like it's just not there. Those opportunities aren't there. And if they are there, they're not balanced. They're not. It's not, things are not equal.
Yeah.
You know, so that's one way I believe in of doing that. Really.
Amazing. Thank you for that response. I think you did justice to the question. Let's go back to the book. Curious to know who your favorite character to write about is. Who is it Lola? Is it Tude? Is it Ladi? Who did you enjoy writing about the most? And who was also such a hassle, like in terms of how difficult it was to be able to conjure so many things together about him or her?
My favourite character was Tunde.
Ooh,
to write about.
the villain.
The villain, because I wanted him to be really making more noise. Because if you read the story,
He had a lot of baggage.
he had a lot of baggage, but you can see why he had a lot of baggage. He wasn't born that way. He's a victim of the society around him. Because you can, I won't say why, but look at his parents, both of them.
What?
So you have a case where there's a dysfunctional triangle going around.
Yeah.
So when you just see men behaving a certain way, they just don't wake up and they're like that. They also, sometimes they're victims, sometimes they're just carrying on what they saw their dad do, which you can see in his case. I mean, the dad was hardly a very good example, was it?
Unfortunately, which sort of like shines a spotlight on issues around role modeling and how the family is a very important institution that helps to sort of like shape our society. And oftentimes we kind of like underestimate the value or the role that role modeling and parenting actually plays. Interestingly, as we evolve as humans, we tend to meet people from different walks of life. You meet amazing people, and you also meet very flawed individuals too. And you kind of notice some elements of childhood trauma, key issues that were sort of like
there was there was some childhood trauma.
Yeah.
There were some losses there. There were the fact that he never felt good enough. He never felt good enough. He was made not to feel as if he wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And if you notice, all three of them were looking for one thing. All of them were looking for love.
Was still looking for love? Or was just looking for someone to dominate?
He was looking for love. He was looking for someone to love him as he was. Which everyone's looking for love.
But was he deserving of that love? Nah.
Well, in his own head he probably was. I mean, he was a textbook narcissist.
Yeah.
So remember, narcissists live in a world of their own. So they see things differently than everyone else. So in his own head, he believed with everything that he was deserving of love.
Interesting. Okay. My next question is perhaps would be more appropriate for upcoming writers. I believe for every single person here, your stories are valid. And there's a book in everyone, literally. It might not be fiction, it could be not fiction. I wanted you to let us in on your writing process and what advice would you give to someone who is looking at pursuing writing, either at a huge level, at the full-time level, or something that they do on the side?
Okay, I've always wanted to write since I was a kid, and when I was in Nigeria, I used to write as well. But when I came back in 1992, and I began to take it seriously, but the issue is obviously I needed to find a job to put food on the table as well. So that's why I said I have an HND in business administration, so I started working as well. Yeah. But in my spare time, which is in the evenings, I started writing, and I started going to creative writing classes. If that's something that you really feel, see, writing in a way it's a bit like a disease. You don't do it for the money. There's something in you compelling to get the story out. You definitely don't do it for the money, because how much they want to pay you. I work from 9 to 6, and when I get home, I'm writing again. Sometimes about 12 o'clock.
Wow.
So you must really have that passion in you. Because very few people are going to be able to be like Chiamanda or be able to say, I just write full time. But I'm hoping to get there. I'm hoping that with this book with HarperCollins,
Yeah.
Hoping to get there.
Huge royalties, 6 figures.
Yeah. I'm hoping to be able to do that, but it's taken me like 20 years to get that contract from HarperCollins, and of writing, of sending things out, getting rejected, of it's taken me 20 years of my life to get to this place. So if it's what you really want to do, start putting your stuff out there. There's some creative writing, but you don't have to have an MA. I decided to go down that route to get more knowledge about the techniques of writing, but you don't have to do that. You can right now. There's a lot. If you go on YouTube, there's so many videos on there on how to write short fiction, how to write. It's all up there. But you now have technology. You now have social media.
Yeah.
So you can now actually form. There are lots of writers groups, critique groups as well. So you can do that. You can find lots of critique groups where you can actually start sharing your stuff online. Now, that will take away the fear of other people seeing your work and critiquing it. You have to get over that, and you must be someone who's got very tough skin, because people will critique it, and you have to be ready for that. Part of my MA was actually us writing short stories and having peer reviews, and you have to be ready to take what they say on the chin, and you've got to be that confident in yourself to know what to take, what to spit out, and what to take out that feedback. I've just finished writing an 80,000 word historical fiction from HarperCollins, and I'm now on the 10th review of it. Write it, send it back to the editor, make comments, send it back, send it back, send it back. 80,000 words. So when it comes back to was read,
queries, yeah.
They're just trying to make the book better.
Yeah.
So you've got to be someone who's ready to take feedback. You've got to be someone that when you see your reviews on Amazon, don't let it tear you to pieces, because it's a bit like Marmite. Some people will love your book, and some people will hate it. So like all the books in the library, if you look at some of those fiction books, some people will say, oh yeah, I just love this, and I just hate it. Everyone, it's just like J.K. Rowling. Some people love her selection of books. Some people like the Harry Potter series. Some people like the ones she did after that.
Yeah.
But you're never going to let everyone like your books. And sometimes people just like books because they feel it's an intellectual thing to say, but actually they don't like it. But they just feel like an intellectual compliment. So, oh yeah.
Like they would, like we love to say in Nigeria, like not everybody will like you or your work, because you're not jollof rice.
Yeah, you're not jollof rice. Only jollof rice. Everyone loves jollof rice, but everyone will like your work. But the most important thing is that you're getting your story out.
Yeah.
When it's non-fiction, because for some people it could be that they want to write their biography. If you feel strongly about it, write it, because everyone wants to hear your somebody out there. Your story is going to touch somebody's life, and if it's fiction and you've got a very vivid imagination like me, then start writing it. But if that's the case, start today. Write your story.
Yeah.
Put about a few paragraphs on Facebook and see what your friends say. And no matter what they say, go on with it.
Yeah. Great tough skin.
Tough skin. That's what you need.
Yeah. Lovely. On the final note, I feel it would be great for you to share a bit about your experience growing up in Nigeria, because I feel that sort of like reflects a great deal in your work, in the book. And tell us a bit of what it was like growing up in the 90s. Have you reminisced a bit about childhood, and what are those things you still miss? Do you travel a lot for it?
Yeah. I was in Nigeria in May. Funnily enough, went to go see my mum.
Oh, nice.
Sadly, a few weeks ago. Yeah, I lost my mum. But I'm glad I went to go and see her in May. So basically, as I said, my parents came over here in the 60s as Commonwealth students and had to work 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, and they couldn't really look after me and my sister, me first, and work at the same time and go to school at the same time, because in those days Nigeria was always in pursuit of education and they had to work at the same time, always in search of what they used to call the golden fleece. And so they started looking for a foster parent for me, a nanny. And it took me to some places outside London with varying levels of success. In some places, my dad said they were chased out of one town. by the local members of the NFL. Remember, this was in the 60s, so
Wow.
and so someone told me about this lady in Brighton who seemed to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Her name was Mrs. Was Stella Trott, and she was ready to adopt to foster black kids, and she took me there, and she said, my mum said that as soon as they put me in her arms, that I held on to her. Now that now sparked a relationship with that family that has gone on for the past 58 years. So I'm 58 now, and so Mrs. Strauss has passed, but we're still close with her children and her grandchildren. So going to school in the early 70s in England, that was quite interesting. Yeah. So we now people would come up to you and say the most, it's kind of things you can't say nowadays. So, and then obviously the depiction of black people on the TV, I don't think there's anyone here who ever watched a program called Love Your Neighbor, or no, there was a program called Love Your Neighbor, and there were certain programs on TV where black people weren't really portrayed in a very, very good light, and people would casually use the N-word. So you get to school and people would generally call you the N-word. And I remember Mrs. Straw having to go up to school several times and fight with people, and not necessarily fight, but have conversations with the teachers, and the teachers would say things like, "Oh, we're just having a laugh," and so it wasn't always that easy. And me and my sister, I think we were about 5 black kids in that school of about 500 kids at that particular point in time. So 70s England was very, very different than what it is now. Soon after that, my parents decided to go back to Nigeria. So Nigeria, Lagos at that particular point in time was a different country than it is now. It was very bright, and there was a hopefulness there because they'd just come out of the Civil War, and people were very, very, there was lots of money, let's put it that way. There was lots of money, there was lots of oil money, there were lots of parties, people were very happy and jolly, and people used to do things like leaving their front door open.
I remember sense around security.
There was no sense about security. So one time basically I got lost. I couldn't find my way back to my house, and people
what
now
part of Lagos was that?
It was in a place called Ichire.
Oh.
And about 10 people formed a contingent and said, "Who wants this child? She's not speaking our language. She's speaking this language we don't understand." And somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they managed to all take me back to found where I was living and took me back there. And said, "This child is speaking what we call Oyinbo English." The Oyinbo is it's like the Yoruba form of saying white person. And that it wouldn't happen that nowadays. That would have been, I don't know what would have happened to me. But people, it was just a different kind of mindset where people there was this kind of sense of community, and it was also, even though there was lots of money, so people weren't very that focused on getting money. So as long as they had 3 square meals, people were happy. As long as they could go to area parties and dance and eat and wear ashwabi, they were happy. And I think obviously as things went on, and you now start having social media, and people started to want to live like the Joneses and live this particular way of life, where everybody wants to live this kind of way of life. So things really pretty much did have changed in terms of people being more materialistic. And I think the more materialistic people got, the more society ills started to grow. So I left in the 90s and came back here. When I came back here, obviously I started working in different places as a business admin person. Worked in publishing, worked in private, I worked in the council. But at the same time, that desire to write began to come back to me. And then I started, the first thing I did, I went to a college and did a Saturday course in writing, and kept on doing that. And then I decided to start entering my work into writing competitions. And
you won a few?
So I won a few. And then I decided to do an MA. And after doing an MA, I got a book deal from Ankara Press.
Yeah.
And then I kept on writing myself. I started self-publishing as well. And I think in 2020, I was approached by someone from HarperCollins asking me to write a story about a Nigerian lady who lived in this country during the Second World War. I have written historical fiction before because Niger Love Stories is a collection of historical work.
Yeah.
Different short stories that start from about 1920 in colonial Nigeria to kind of futuristic England. So they're all about Niger itself is kind of fond way of saying Nigeria. So it's a collection of short stories about the whole concept of being Nigerian, but in different points in time in life. So you've got stories from the 1920s, 1950s, pre-independence, post-independence, and one of the stories in there it talks about a kind of dystopian UK where this kind of Nigel Farage kind of figure manages to become PM. And imagination. Everyone, and then everyone whose great grandparents didn't fight in the First World War is asked to leave the country. And the NHS grinds to a halt. So does the London Underground. So does London buses. And I wrote that story after the BNP won a seat in Back in Dagenham Council about 15 years ago. So so as I said, it's a kind of tongue-in-cheek look at life, and it talks about love, but different kinds of love. So you've got love of country, love of food, So back to my new book with HarperCollins. So when they said write an 80,000 word historical novel, I didn't know how I was going to be able to do it because I've never written anything that long before. But I found the character really interesting. I can't say much about her because they want to do the announcement and everything, and the announcement will be coming out soon in the bookseller. But I found it very interesting. I found it a bit sad that even though she had done so much in this country, I'd never heard about her before. When I was in Nigeria, when I was here, I learned about the Stuarts and Henry VIII and that kind of history. I never learned about my own history. When we got to Nigeria, I found out more about African princes and about the Mali Empire, about the Songhai Empire, about Chaka Zulu and all that. But I never knew about her. I never knew that there were any Nigerians in this country during the 1940s, and I know that they were here in the 1950s and the 1960s because my parents came over there, but the 1930s. So they gave me a picture and told me to write about her. I did all the research and decided to write about her and to make it a romance basically. And the book will be out soon.
I'm
really looking forward to it. so that's it. And I want the book to. I'm making a plug for myself here. I want it to go to all the libraries so people can read more about her. So that in secondary school and in other schools they start talking more and more about people of colour, Black, Asian, Chinese that came over here and were part of the war effort and part of rebuilding this country after the Second World War, which we see in the NHS, which we see in London Underground, which we see in, so it wasn't a case of coming over here, just kind of coming over here that we hear about on Question Time and things like that, but we have always been here since the time of the Romans basically, and trying to get away from that issue of otherness and more togetherness, that we're all part of a great whole of this great country in terms of trying to being part of making it great. I won't use the word making it England great again because that's Trump-like, but this country is great and will always be great. Everyone wants to be part of, but it could be greater. It could be much better than it is. And and just kind of getting away from that issue of otherness, and really, and I think that would really silence a lot of some of the, the stuff that we're hearing in the press are out there in terms of immigration, in terms of, or people coming in and not necessarily wanting to be part of the community. There are different reasons why that's happening, and interrogating those reasons and seeing how this people can be brought in to be part of that whole.
I
So,
agree.
so that's
Trixie, great stuff. This has been such an exciting conversation. I've learned so much from you. I've learned so much from every other person that has contributed to this conversation. I don't know if anyone has got questions or any final ones.
Any more questions? So I don't want it to be as if we're having this conversation by ourselves.
Any takes, hot takes.
Any topics or anything that you want to kind of ask me about that you think, or about the book, or about anything I've written, or about my life.
I'm guessing maybe.
Well, I have a question again. How do you, as a like romantic fiction writer, there is this stereotype that like romance, like fiction itself fine, but romance fiction just like unnecessary. It's for children and women. Like how do you deal with that?
There is that snobbery. There was an advert that went out about a month ago showing this woman in a rocking chair reading like romance, and they said, romances aren't just women in rocking chairs. We like different kinds of there are people that write crime fiction, historical fiction, dystopian fiction. There's all different kinds of fiction. I don't think one should ever be denigrated in front of the other, but I know there is this snobbery around literary fiction. So the people who write literary fiction are the ones who get invited on Question Time. I've never seen a romance or from Question Time. It's usually like literary fiction, like.
But I mean, I just feel people would enjoy what they would.
Yeah, people will enjoy what they will enjoy.
I like what I like.
I think people should be open-minded because romance is part of life, But I think for me, I did start off writing literary fiction because Nigerian love stories is more literary. But there's room for every kind of fiction and for people to enjoy what they want to enjoy. I'm more for that. But I am aware that there is that snobbery out there in terms of what wins. Publishers want to put money behind what wins awards. The 2 awards I got, the writing awards I got were for literary fiction, they weren't for romance. So I understand that perfectly. So the Basafiri Writing Prize is now called the Queen Mary Writing Prize, and I got first prize in that. And it was for a short story called The Go Slow Journey, which is probably more literary.
Go Slow sounds very Nigerian.
It was Nigerian.
Traffic.
It was set in the traffic. It was set there. I mean, all my award-winning stories are in Nigeria stories. But publishers want to put money against what will get them awards, because awards is what will get them into the literary festivals and also onto Question Time. And the big literary festivals, and also win them things like the Orange Prize and things like that, and the Booker Prize, which is what I've not seen any romance writer, winning the Booker Prize yet. So it's that.
Yeah, fingers crossed. That gets better. You were gonna have.
I was just wondering, because you say Nigerian culture is changing slowly. Are you finding it's changing like generation by generation?
Yeah.
And especially now with outside influences like social media and things.
Yes, I mean, a lot of times I see people saying certain things on social media and they're interrogated by they're interrogated. So people will say things like, when I get mad, I won't allow my wife to go and work. And then people will say those kind of things, and then they're interrogated, not just by people from Europe and UK, they're interrogated by other Nigerian women who didn't grow up, go back into that's kind of caveman kind of thing. So they are interrogated because obviously people put things out there and people say, no, you can be your own person. Your life doesn't have to revolve around this. You can have a career. You can be a wife and a mother and still get a job. You can still go back to school. So the world is now a very small village. So someone in in Bombay is connected with somebody in Niger, so connected to somebody in Portugal. So you've got Twitter, you've got social media bringing us closer and closer. So there is that. So yeah, things are changing by generation by generation. The way how my mum saw things is not the way how I see things. The way how my mum saw things is not the way how her mum saw things. So things are changing generation by generation, which is can only be good.
Yeah, I believe it can only get better from here. And thank goodness for social media, for technology. We have a lot to be grateful to the digital world for. And I'm so glad that you made time to be a part of this conversation. Thank you so much. This has been really exciting. We could go on, but I would just allow us a few extra minutes after the closing remarks to mingle. Probably have a one-on-one chat with Ola if you want to. We've got copies of our book, Lovers, Leavers, and Keepers.
And Niger Love Stories,
Yeah, so if you're interested in grabbing a copy, should be happy to sign those. And if you want to pose for a photo, selfie with her, or we should actually have like a group photo as well.
Yeah, that would be good. I'm on Instagram as well, as in.
I think your handle is at Ola Awonubi.
Ola Awonubi, yeah. At Ola Awonubi.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah.
It would be great to give her a follow, and
I'm on Twitter as well.
let's keep the conversation going. We will be having this every month, and watch out for the announcement of the next book we're going to be reading and the author we're going to be having on board. And please spread the word. Tell your friends, tell more people to join us, and hopefully next time when we're doing this, it's going to be a bigger, better turnout, and even a more exciting time. So big thank you to the Guildford Library for hosting us.
Thank you so much.
And we're so grateful to every single one of you that made time out of your busy schedule to be here.
It's a Saturday, so
yeah,
we could be doing anything else.
and it's Christmas.
Shopping, and it's Christmas shopping as well, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So enjoy the rest of your evening. Cheers.
If you wouldn't mind, before you leave, finding out a feedback form for us, just so that we know how we can, as like the Guildford Library, can improve sessions like these going forwards. Thank you.